The crystal throne room of the Zephyrian Empire stretched endlessly, its walls carved from living starstone that pulsed with the heartbeat of a dying star. Emperor Vexthul lounged upon his throne, 6 arms draped carelessly over armrests that had been polished by the tears of conquered worlds. His serpentine tail coiled beneath him like a sleeping predator, and his 4 eyes regarded the holographic display before him with barely concealed disgust. The humans, he spat, the word dripping from his forked tongue like poison. These upstart primates think they can negotiate with the Zephyrian Empire as equals. Chancellor Mordak, a creature whose face resembled melted wax stretched over broken glass, bowed low. My emperor, they have proven, surprisingly resilient. Their colonies have withstood 3 waves of our assault fleets. Perhaps negotiation would, silence. Vexthul's voice carried the weight of crushed planets. I will give them what they ask for. They want a marriage alliance. They want one of my daughters to cement their pathetic treaty. Very well. But, they will get exactly what they deserve. The Emperor's laughter was like breaking crystal. In the shadows of the throne room, Princess Kyera felt her heart sink. She knew that laugh. It meant her father had found a new way to amuse himself at someone else's expense. Summon my daughters, the Emperor commanded. Within moments, 3 figures approached the throne. Princess Velena moved with the fluid grace of a warrior, her silver scales gleaming like armor. She was the Emperor's pride, bred for conquest and, trained in the art of domination. Princess Ziwaxela followed, her psychic abilities crackling around her like visible lightning. She could crush minds with a thought, bend reality to her will. And, then, there was Kyera. She walked with her head down, her scales a dull bronze instead of the magnificent silver or gold of her sisters. Where they stood tall and, proud, she seemed to shrink into herself. Her father's greatest disappointment, the daughter who had inherited none of his cruelty, none of his ambition. The daughter who spent her time in the archives reading about dead civilizations instead of planning to create new graveyards. My daughters, Vexthul announced, the humans have requested a marriage alliance. One of you will be sent to their capital world to marry their chosen representative. Velena stepped forward eagerly. Father, I volunteer. I can ensure the humans remain properly subservient, no. The Emperor's smile was cruel. I have a better idea. Kyera will go. The silence that followed was deafening. Kyera's 2 hearts hammered against her ribs. Her sisters exchanged glances of disbelief and, barely concealed relief. Father, Kyera whispered, surely you don't mean, I mean exactly what I said. Vexthul leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with malicious delight. The humans want a princess. They shall have one. You, my dear Kyera, are about as far from their probably barbaric expectations as possible. Let them have their alien bride. When they realize what a pathetic specimen they've received, perhaps they'll understand their true place in this galaxy. Chancellor Mordak shifted uncomfortably. My Emperor, the humans specifically requested your strongest daughter for the alliance, and, they shall receive her. The Emperor's grin widened impossibly. After all, strength comes in many forms, does it not? Perhaps the humans will appreciate Kyera's unique qualities. The way he said unique made it sound like a terminal disease. Kyera closed her eyes, feeling the familiar sting of her father's rejection. All her life, she had been the spare, the afterthought, the daughter who couldn't live up to the Zephyrian ideals of conquest and cruelty. Where her sisters reveled in violence, she had found solace in ancient texts and forgotten philosophies. Where they saw enemies to be crushed, she saw beings with their own stories, their own dreams. Her father had always seen this as weakness. The marriage will take place on Earth, Vexthul continued. You will represent the Empire, Kyera. Try not to embarrass us more than absolutely necessary. Velena stepped closer to her younger sister, her voice a venomous whisper. Finally, you'll be useful for something. Though I wonder if even the humans are desperate enough to accept damaged goods. Ziwexela's laugh was like breaking ice. Perhaps they'll send her back. Imagine Father's fury if even the humans reject her. Kyera said nothing. She had learned long ago that silence was her best defense against her family's cruelty. But, inside, something small and defiant flickered to life. Perhaps being sent away from this place of constant humiliation wasn't the punishment her father intended it to be. You leave tomorrow, the Emperor declared. Pack light. I doubt you'll be staying long once the humans see what they've gotten themselves into. As her sisters filed out, already discussing how they would divide Kyera's meager possessions, the princess remained standing before her father's throne. For once in her life, she found the courage to speak. Father, what if the humans actually accept the alliance? What if they don't send me back? Vexthal's expression shifted from amusement to something darker. Then, you will do your duty to the Empire, daughter. You will be our eyes and ears among them. You will report their weaknesses, their fears, their secrets. And, when the time comes, you will help us destroy them from within. Kyera nodded slowly, but, inside, something had fundamentally changed. For the first time in her life, she was being sent somewhere her father's influence couldn't immediately reach. Somewhere she might, possibly, be free to be herself. I understand, father. But, she didn't. Not yet. The next morning, Kyera stood on the departure platform of the Imperial Space Station, watching as workers loaded her few possessions onto the diplomatic transport. Her belongings fit into 3 small cases, mostly books and a few keepsakes from her mother, who had died when Kyera was young. Her sisters had luxury suites filled with weapons and treasures. Kyera had stories. Ambassador Theklan, a career diplomat who had the unfortunate task of escorting the princess to Earth, approached with obvious reluctance. His species, the Netherim, were known for their perfectionist nature, and, being assigned to what everyone assumed was a doomed mission, had left him visibly agitated. Princess, he said with a stiff bow, the transport is ready. We should arrive at the human capital in 7 standard days. Have you met humans before, Ambassador? Kyera asked as they boarded the sleek vessel. Theklan's mandibles clicked nervously. Once, during preliminary negotiations. Strange creatures. They seemed to value the oddest things, art, music, literature. They asked more questions about our cultural heritage than our military capabilities. How unusual, Kyera murmured, though something in her chest fluttered with what might have been hope. As the transport pulled away from the space station, Kyera pressed her face to the viewport and watched the Zephyrian Empire shrink behind them. For the first time in 25 years, she was leaving the only home she had ever known. The place that had never truly felt like home at all. Princess, Theklan said carefully, I have received the intelligence briefings on your intended husband. Would you like to review them? Kyera turned from the viewport. Please. The ambassador activated a holographic display, and, suddenly, the transport's cabin was filled with the image of a human male. Kyera had seen humans before in intelligence reports, but, always in the context of military briefings or strategic assessments. This was different. The man in the hologram had dark hair and thoughtful brown eyes. His face was angular but kind, with lines that suggested he smiled often. He was tall for a human, with broad shoulders that spoke of physical strength, but it was his expression that caught Kyera's attention. There was intelligence there, but also something else, a warmth that she had never seen in any Zephyrian face. This is Captain Marcus Chen, Theklan began reading from his notes. Age 32. Former military officer, now serving as Earth's primary diplomatic liaison. He volunteered for this assignment specifically. Volunteered? Kyera interrupted. He wasn't ordered to marry me. Apparently not. According to our sources, when the Earth government put out the call for a representative to handle the marriage alliance, Captain Chen was the first to step forward. Most curious. Kyera studied the hologram more carefully. Why would anyone volunteer to marry a complete stranger from an alien species? Especially one whose empire had been trying to conquer his people. What else do we know about him? He's considered something of an oddity among his own people, Theklan continued. Brilliant military strategist, but he left active service to pursue diplomatic solutions to conflicts. He has degrees in xenobiology and comparative cultures. Speaks 14 languages, including some Zephyrian. He speaks our language. Apparently he's been studying our culture for years. The human government considers him their foremost expert on the Zephyrian Empire. Kyera felt a strange sensation in her stomach, nervousness, perhaps, but mixed with something she couldn't identify. This human had spent years studying her people. What had he learned? What did he expect from a Zephyrian princess? There's something else, Theklan added reluctantly. Our intelligence suggests that Captain Chen specifically requested to meet you. What do you mean? When your father announced that you would be the one sent for the marriage alliance, the human government offered to select a different representative. They seemed to think that perhaps one of your sisters would be more suitable. But Captain Chen insisted that he would be honored to meet you specifically. Kyera stared at the hologram, her mind reeling. He asked for me. But he's never met me. He doesn't know anything about me. Actually, Theklan said quietly, it appears he knows quite a bit. The ambassador manipulated the display, bringing up a new set of documents. Kyera's breath caught. They were academic papers, studies of Zephyrian literature, analyses of ancient philosophical texts, examinations of pre-imperial cultural traditions. And, on every single one, in the author credits, was her name. You published these under a pseudonym, Theklan noted, but human intelligence is apparently quite good at uncovering such things. Captain Chen has read all of your work. In fact, he's cited several of your papers in his own research. Kyera felt dizzy. Her father had always dismissed her academic pursuits as useless distractions. Her sisters mocked her interest in ancient cultures and dead civilizations. But this human stranger had not only read her work, he had built upon it. Princess, Theklan said gently, I believe there may be more to this marriage alliance than any of us realized. For the rest of the journey, Kyera found herself studying everything she could about Earth and its people. The more she learned, the more fascinated she became. Humans were indeed strange creatures, they created art for its own sake, told stories that served no strategic purpose, and seemed to form emotional bonds with beings who couldn't possibly benefit them. They were nothing like Zephyrians. And, perhaps, Kyera thought as she watched the blue-white marble of Earth grow larger in the viewport, that was exactly what she had been hoping for all her life. The landing on Earth was unlike anything Kyera had ever experienced. Instead of the stark military efficiency of Zephyrian spaceports, the human facility was filled with color and life. Plants grew in carefully tended gardens between the landing platforms. Art covered the walls, not the intimidating displays of conquest that adorn Zephyrian buildings, but images of beauty for its own sake. As she descended the ramp of the diplomatic transport, Kyera's legs felt weak. Not from the journey, but from the sudden realization that she was about to meet the man who had volunteered to marry her. The man who had read her work and, somehow seen something worth knowing in the Emperor's unwanted daughter. A delegation of humans waited at the bottom of the ramp, dressed in formal but non-military attire. They looked nervous but hopeful, an expression Kyera had never seen on the face of anyone meeting a member of the Zephyrian imperial family. And, there, at the front of the group, was Marcus Chen. He was taller than she had expected, and younger-looking despite being 7 years older than her. His diplomatic uniform was immaculate but somehow approachable, and, when their eyes met, he smiled, not the predatory grin of conquest she was used to, but something warm and genuine. He stepped forward and, to her amazement, attempted a greeting in her own language. His accent was terrible, but the effort was sincere. Welcome to Earth, Princess Kyera. I am Marcus Chen, and I am honored to meet you. For a moment, Kyara couldn't speak. When she finally found her voice, it came out barely above a whisper. "The honor is mine, Captain Chen." He gestured to the delegation behind him. "These are some of Earth's representatives, eager to welcome you to our world. But, first, I thought you might like to see something." Marcus led her to a small viewing area overlooking the spaceport. Below them, Kyara could see humans going about their daily lives, not soldiers or politicians, but ordinary people. Children played in the gardens while their parents worked. Artists painted murals on the walls. Musicians performed for small crowds who had gathered simply to listen. "This is what we're fighting to protect," Marcus said quietly. "Not just our territory or our resources, but this. The right to create beauty, to tell stories, to live in peace." Kyara watched a human child chase a butterfly through the garden, laughing with pure joy. In that moment, she understood something that had eluded her all her life. Strength wasn't just about conquest and domination. Sometimes, the strongest thing you could do was protect something fragile and beautiful. "Your work," Marcus continued, "your studies of pre-imperial Zephyrian culture, they showed me that your people weren't always conquerors. Once, they were artists and philosophers, builders and dreamers." "That was a long time ago," Kyara said sadly. "Was it?" Marcus turned to look at her, and, in his eyes she saw something she had never seen directed at her before, respect. Because standing here, talking to the woman who preserved those stories, who kept that knowledge alive despite everything. "I think perhaps it wasn't as long ago as you might think." As they walked toward the diplomatic complex where she would be staying, Kyara felt something she had never experienced before. For the first time in her life, someone was looking at her not as the Emperor's disappointing daughter, not as a failed Zephyrian princess, but as herself. And, perhaps, she thought as Marcus showed her to quarters that were comfortable rather than ostentatious, beautiful rather than intimidating, this marriage alliance might not be the punishment her father intended it to be after all. Perhaps it might be the beginning of something neither of their species had expected, understanding. Kyara's quarters in the human diplomatic complex were unlike anything she had ever seen. Where Zephyrian architecture demanded submission through overwhelming scale and harsh angles, the human spaces invited comfort. Her rooms were spacious but not cavernous, filled with natural light from large windows that looked out onto gardens rather than weapons arrays. The walls were covered with what Marcus had called books, physical objects containing written words, rather than the sterile digital archives of her home world. Hundreds of them lined shelves that stretched from floor to ceiling. When she had expressed amazement at the concept, Marcus had smiled and told her they were hers to explore as long as she remained on Earth. "We thought you might appreciate having something to read," he had said, and Kyara had nearly wept at the casual kindness of it. Now, 3 days after her arrival, she sat in a chair by the window reading about human history while Marcus worked at a desk nearby. They had fallen into this routine after their first official meeting, spending time in comfortable silence, occasionally sharing observations about each other's cultures. It was peaceful in a way that Kyara had never experienced. On Zephyr Prime, silence was either a prelude to punishment or a sign of boredom. Here, with Marcus, it felt like companionship. "Marcus," she said quietly, closing the book she had been reading. "Yes." He looked up from his work, giving her his full attention in that way he had that made her feel like the most important person in the galaxy. "This book about your Second World War, it speaks of humans fighting other humans. Why would you document such shame?" Marcus set down his stylus and leaned back in his chair. "Why do you think it's shameful to document it? In the Empire, we only record our victories. Our glorious conquests. The times we failed or fought among ourselves are forgotten. Erased. But, how do you learn from those mistakes if you don't remember making them?" Kyara considered this. It was such a simple concept, yet it went against everything she had been taught. "You believe there is value in remembering failure?" "I believe there's value in remembering everything. The good and the bad, the beautiful and the ugly. How else can we understand who we really are? She thought of her own work, her studies of pre-imperial Zephyrian culture that her father dismissed as dwelling on weakness. The humans who wrote this book, were they punished for documenting defeat? Quite the opposite. They were honored for ensuring future generations would remember, so those mistakes might never be repeated. Kyra felt something crack inside her chest, not breaking, but opening. On Zephyr Prime, I would be considered a traitor for the work I do. Studying the time before the Empire, when my people lived in harmony with other species rather than conquering them. Here, Marcus said softly, you would be considered a treasure. Someone who kept the truth alive when others wanted it buried. Before Kyra could respond, an alert chimed on Marcus's communication device. His expression immediately became more formal as he answered. Chen here. Yes, sir. I understand. We'll be there immediately. He ended the call and turned to Kyra with an apologetic smile. I'm afraid duty calls. The Zephyrian delegation has arrived for the preliminary negotiations, and your presence is requested. Kyra's two hearts sank. She had known this moment would come, but she had hoped for more time in this peaceful bubble before reality intruded. My sisters, Princess Valana and Princess Ziwaxela, along with a full diplomatic corps. They walked through the complex toward the main conference room, and Kyra felt her old anxieties returning with each step. How long had it been since she had felt at ease? 3 days. 3 days of being treated with kindness and respect, and now she was about to face her family again. Kyra, Marcus said quietly as they neared the conference room doors, remember that you're not the same person who left Zephyr Prime. You've seen another way to live now. I'm still the Emperor's unwanted daughter. No, Marcus said firmly, stopping and turning to face her. You're Princess Kyra, keeper of ancient wisdom, scholar of lost civilizations, and the woman who chose to preserve truth instead of embracing convenient lies. You are exactly who you were meant to be. His words wrapped around her like armor as the doors to the conference room slid open. The sight that greeted them was painfully familiar. Princess Valena stood at the head of a delegation of Zephyrian officials, her silver scales gleaming like weapons in the conference room's lights. She wore full ceremonial armor, despite this being a diplomatic meeting, and her 4 eyes surveyed the human representatives with barely concealed contempt. Princess Ziwaxela lounged in her chair with affected boredom, her psychic abilities causing small objects around her to float and spin aimlessly. She had always used her powers as a form of intimidation, a reminder that she could crush minds as easily as she manipulated matter. Sister, Valena said as Kyra entered, her voice carrying across the room like a weapon. How rustic you've become. Kyra felt the familiar urge to shrink, to make herself smaller and less noticeable. But Marcus's presence beside her, steady and supportive, gave her strength she didn't know she possessed. Valana. Ziwaxela. I trust your journey was comfortable. Adequate, Ziwaxela replied without looking up from her floating objects. Though I do hope this business can be concluded quickly. The company here is beneath our usual standards. Several of the human diplomats shifted uncomfortably, but Marcus remained calm. Welcome to Earth, your highnesses. We're honored by your presence and look forward to productive negotiations. Valana's laugh was like grinding metal. How charmingly optimistic. Tell me, Captain Chen, what exactly do you hope to gain from this alliance? Surely you don't expect the Empire to treat humanity as an equal partner? I expect, Marcus said carefully, that both our peoples will benefit from peaceful coexistence rather than continued conflict. Peaceful coexistence, Ziwaxela repeated, finally, looking up. Her eyes fixed on Marcus, and Kyra felt a chill of fear. Her sister was probing his mind, looking for weaknesses to exploit. Such an interesting concept. Tell me, Captain, what do you see when you look at my sister? The question hung in the air like a blade. Kyra knew exactly what her sister was doing, trying to humiliate her in front of the humans, to expose her as the unwanted burden she had always been told she was. But, Marcus didn't hesitate. I see someone who has spent her life preserving knowledge that others wanted destroyed. I see a scholar who chose truth over convenient fiction. I see a person of remarkable courage and integrity. Velana's expression shifted from amusement to annoyance. How diplomatic. But, surely you see her for what she truly is, the Empire's greatest failure. A princess who lacks the strength to conquer, the will to dominate. Father sent her here as a joke, you know. A message about how little he values this alliance. Then, your father made an error in judgment, Marcus replied calmly. Because he sent us exactly the person we needed to meet. Kyra felt something warm bloom in her chest. Throughout her life, she had been defined by what she lacked, her father's cruelty, her sister's hunger for power, the Empire's appetite for destruction. But, Marcus was defining her by what she possessed instead. How quaint, Zwexella said, rising from her chair. Objects around the room began to orbit her more rapidly, a display of psychic power that had cowed countless diplomats. Perhaps we should test just how much the captain values his bride-to-be. She gestured, and, suddenly, Kyra found herself lifted off her feet, suspended in the air by invisible forces. It was a childhood game of her sister's, demonstrating power by making Kyra helpless. But, this time was different. This time, Marcus stepped forward. Release her. Now. Zwexella smiled. Or what, human? You'll declare war on the Zephyrian Empire? I'll consider it a violation of diplomatic immunity and an act of aggression against my betrothed. The word betrothed rang through the room like a bell. Marcus wasn't just defending a negotiating partner or a political ally. He was defending someone he had claimed as family. You're betrothed? Velana laughed. You would risk conflict over her. She's worthless, Captain. Father's greatest shame. She, Marcus said, his voice carrying a steel that reminded everyone he had been a military officer, is one of the most remarkable people I've ever met. And, if you continue to treat her with disrespect, I'll consider it an insult to both Earth and the marriage alliance. For a moment, the room balanced on a knife's edge. Then, Zwexella's smile faltered. Slowly, she lowered Kyra back to the ground. How protective of you, Captain. How decent of him, Kyra said quietly, finding her voice. Something our people could learn from. The shock of hearing her speak back was evident on both her sisters' faces. The Kyra they knew would never have dared to defend herself, let alone criticize the Empire. Sister, Velana said carefully, surely you don't mean to suggest that human ways are superior to our own? I suggest that there are different ways to be strong, Kyra replied. Different ways to have value. Here, I am respected for my mind, my knowledge, my perspective. Not diminished for failing to be a conqueror. Father will be interested to hear of your new perspective, Zwexella said softly. I wonder how he'll respond to learning that his unwanted daughter has found her voice. Then, tell him, Kyra said, standing straighter. Tell him that the daughter he sent away as a joke has discovered what it means to be valued for who she is, rather than punished for who she's not. The negotiations that followed were tense but productive. The humans had done their research well, offering trade agreements and technological exchanges that would benefit both species. They spoke of mutual defense pacts and cultural exchanges, of sharing knowledge rather than hoarding it. And, throughout it all, Kyra found herself contributing in ways she never had before. Her knowledge of pre-imperial Zephyrian culture proved invaluable in bridging gaps between the two species. When discussions stalled over cultural misunderstandings, she was able to provide context that made compromise possible. For the first time in her life, she was not just tolerated but needed. As the formal sessions ended and the delegations prepared to retire for the evening, Velana approached her younger sister. Walk with me, she commanded. They stepped onto a balcony overlooking the human gardens, and, for a moment, Velana was silent. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost some of its usual arrogance. "You're different." "Yes. The humans have changed you." "No," Kaera said thoughtfully. "They've simply allowed me to be who I always was." Velana studied her sister's face. "Father won't approve. Father sent me here to be humiliated and forgotten. Instead, I've found respect and purpose. If he disapproves, then, perhaps his judgment isn't as sound as we were taught to believe." "You're playing a dangerous game, sister." "Am I? Or am I finally playing the right game?" Velana was quiet for a long moment. Then, almost too softly to hear, she said, "I used to envy your books. Your ability to find escape in stories of other worlds, other ways of being." Kaera turned to look at her sister in surprise. "You never said." "Of course I didn't. Weakness is punished in the Empire. But, sometimes I wondered what it would be like to have your freedom to dream. You could have that freedom here." Velana's laugh was bitter. "I am the Empire's perfect daughter. I cannot simply abandon everything I was raised to be." "Can't you? Or won't you?" Before Velana could answer, Marcus appeared in the doorway. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but, Princess Kaera, there's something I'd like to show you." Kaera looked at her sister, who nodded slowly. "Go," Velana said. "Enjoy your humans' attentions while they last." Marcus led Kaera through the complex to a room she hadn't seen before. When the doors opened, she gasped. It was a library, but, unlike any she had ever imagined. The walls stretched up 3 stories, lined with books from floor to ceiling. Comfortable reading areas were scattered throughout, with soft lighting and plants that made the space feel alive. "This is the Earth Cultural Archive," Marcus explained. "The collected knowledge and stories of our entire species. Literature, history, philosophy, science, everything we've learned and dreamed and created." Kaera moved through the space in wonder, running her fingers along the spines of countless volumes. "It's magnificent. But, why show me this?" "Because," Marcus said, "I wanted you to see what we're offering. Not just a political alliance, but a cultural exchange. Your knowledge of ancient Zephyrian civilization, combined with our archives, together, we could preserve and share the wisdom of both our peoples. My father would consider that treason. Your father considers many things treason that the rest of the galaxy might call progress." Kaera stopped before a section marked Xenocultural Studies, and found, to her amazement, several volumes with her pseudonym on the spine. Her work, translated into human languages and included in their archives. "You've preserved my research. We've honored it. Just as we hope to honor the person who created it." She turned to face him, and, in the soft light of the archive, she saw something in his expression that made her heart's race. It wasn't just respect or appreciation. It was something deeper, warmer. "Marcus," she said quietly, "why did you really volunteer for this assignment?" He was quiet for a moment, considering his words. "Because when I read your work, I realized that somewhere in the Zephyrian Empire was a mind that thought like I did. Someone who believed that understanding was more valuable than conquest, that preserving knowledge was more important than accumulating power. And, I thought, if such a person existed, if she was being sent to Earth as part of this alliance, then, maybe, just maybe, there was hope for both our species. And, now that you've met me." Marcus stepped closer, and, Kaera felt her breath catch. "Now I know that hope was justified. And, I know that whatever this marriage alliance becomes, I'm grateful to have met the most remarkable woman in the galaxy." As they stood together in the archive surrounded by the collected wisdom of 2 civilizations, Kaera felt something she had never experienced before. For the first time in her life, she was exactly where she belonged. And, she was falling in love. The morning of the 3rd day of negotiations brought unwelcome news. Kyera woke to find Ambassador Theclon waiting in her quarters, his mandibles clicking with barely controlled anxiety. "Princess, we've received a transmission from the Empire. Your father wishes to speak with you directly." Kyera felt her newfound confidence falter. "Now. Immediately. The transmission is being routed to Conference Room 7. As they walked through the halls of the diplomatic complex, Kyera tried to prepare herself for what was to come. Her father's voice across the void of space, carrying with it all the weight of imperial displeasure. She had known this moment would arrive, but she had hoped for more time to become stronger. Marcus was waiting outside the conference room when they arrived. "I heard," he said quietly. "Would you like me to stay?" "Protocol dictates that I speak with the Emperor alone," Ambassador Theclon interjected nervously. "Protocol," Marcus said with a slight smile, "is often overruled by personal preference. This is Kyera's choice." She looked at him, drawing strength from his steady presence. "Please stay." The holographic display activated, and, suddenly, Emperor Vexthol's imposing figure filled the room. Even across the vast distance of space, his presence was overwhelming. His four eyes fixed immediately on Kyera, and his expression was colder than the void between stars. "Daughter. Father." Kyera managed to keep her voice steady, though her hearts hammered against her ribs. "I have received interesting reports from your sisters. They tell me you have forgotten your place." "I have found my place." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "Your place is wherever I decree it to be. You are a princess of the Zephyrian Empire, not some human's pet scholar. I am a keeper of knowledge and a seeker of truth. That has always been my place, whether you chose to recognize it or not." Vexthol's laugh was like breaking glass. "Such courage, all of a sudden. Tell me, daughter, has your human lover filled your head with romantic notions of independence?" Kyera felt heat rise in her cheeks, but, before she could respond, Marcus stepped forward into the hologram's field of view. "Your Majesty," he said with a respectful bow, "I am Captain Marcus Chen, Earth's diplomatic representative." "Ah, the fool who volunteered to marry my unwanted daughter. Tell me, Captain, what do you hope to gain from this charade?" "The honor of marrying a remarkable woman, and the beginning of peace between our peoples." Vexthol's expression shifted to one of cruel amusement. "Remarkable? You clearly know nothing about Zephyrian standards. Kyera is my greatest disappointment, weak, useless, a drain on imperial resources." "Then, your standards," Marcus said calmly, "are flawed." The silence that followed was deafening. No one had ever spoken to Emperor Vexthol with such directness. Even through the holographic transmission, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Did you just question the judgment of the Zephyrian Empire?" "I questioned your judgment regarding your daughter. The Empire itself remains to be evaluated." Kyera watched her father's face cycle through several expressions, surprise, rage, and, finally, something that might have been grudging respect for Marcus's audacity. "You have courage, human. Foolish courage, but courage nonetheless. Very well. Since you are so enamored with my failure of a daughter, perhaps you would appreciate a demonstration of what true Zephyrian nobility looks like." The Emperor's image shifted, and, suddenly, Valana and Zyxella appeared on either side of him. "I am recalling my true daughters," Vexthol announced. "This alliance has served its purpose. We have learned the location of your defensive installations, the size of your fleets, the weaknesses in your planetary shields. Valana will return to lead the conquest fleet, and Zyxella will coordinate our psychic warfare division." Kyera felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "Father, the peace treaty was never intended to be permanent. Did you truly believe I would allow humanity to remain independent? You are all resources to be harvested, nothing more." "And, what of me?" Kyera asked, though she already knew the answer. "You will remain on Earth, as agreed. When our fleets arrive, you will ensure that resistance is minimal. You will be our agent on the inside, gathering intelligence and sabotaging their defenses. I won't do it. The Emperor's expression turned deadly. You will do as you are commanded, or you will be considered a traitor to the Empire. Then, I am a traitor. The words hung in the air like a sword. Kyra couldn't believe she had said them, couldn't believe she had finally spoken the truth that had been growing in her heart for days. Vexthul leaned forward, his image crackling with the interference of his rage. You would betray your own species for these humans? I would choose peace over conquest. I would choose understanding over domination. I would choose love over fear. Love? The Emperor's laughter was venomous. You think this human loves you? You are a political convenience, nothing more. When our fleets arrive, he will abandon you without hesitation. Marcus stepped forward again, his hand finding Kyra's. Your Majesty, you are mistaken. I would be honored to call Kyra my wife, alliance or no alliance. Peace or war makes no difference to my feelings for her. Then, you are both fools, Vexthul snarled. Kyra, you have 3 days to reconsider. When my fleets arrive at the edge of this system, you will either be my agent or my enemy. There is no third option. The transmission ended, leaving the conference room in heavy silence. Well, Marcus said after a moment, I think that could have gone better. Despite everything, Kyra found herself laughing, a sound somewhere between hysteria and relief. You just declared your love for me while defying the most powerful being in the galaxy. Did I? I must have gotten caught up in the moment. Marcus turned to face her fully. But, I meant every word. Before Kyra could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the complex. Ambassador Theklan's communication device activated, broadcasting an urgent message from Earth's orbital monitoring stations. Multiple contacts detected at the edge of the solar system. Zephyrian fleet signatures confirmed. Estimated arrival time, 72 hours. Kyra closed her eyes, feeling the weight of inevitability. Her father had moved faster than anyone expected. The war was coming, and she was trapped between two worlds, one that had never wanted her, and one that had welcomed her but would now have every reason to doubt her loyalty. I need to speak with Earth's leadership, Marcus said grimly. They need to know what we're facing. Marcus, wait. Kyra caught his arm. My father was right about one thing. When your people learn that I'm the daughter of their enemy, when they realize I've been here while he planned this attack. They'll realize that you chose to warn us instead of helping him. They'll see that you chose Earth over the Empire. Will they? Or will they see a potential spy who might be playing a deeper game? Marcus was quiet for a moment, and Kyra felt her heart sink. Of course he would have doubts. Anyone rational would. But, then, he turned back to her, and his expression was resolute. Then, I'll make sure they see the truth. I'll make sure they understand who you really are. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Emergency sessions were called with Earth's military leadership. Defense fleets were mobilized. Evacuation plans were activated for the outer colonies. And, through it all, Kyra found herself in the strange position of being both refugee and strategic advisor. Her knowledge of Zephyrian military tactics proved invaluable in planning Earth's defense, even as some officials looked at her with barely concealed suspicion. General Harrison, Earth's military commander, leaned over the holographic display showing the approaching Zephyrian fleet. Princess, based on these ship configurations, what can we expect for their opening move? Kyra studied the tactical display, her mind automatically analyzing the formation patterns she had learned as a child of the Empire. My sister Velana will be commanding. She favors overwhelming frontal assault, but she's not stupid. She'll probe your defenses first, looking for weaknesses. And, Princess Ziwexela? Psychic warfare. She'll try to break your communications, create confusion and fear among your forces. Standard Imperial doctrine is to shatter enemy morale before the main assault begins. Can her abilities affect our technology directly? Kyra hesitated. Not directly, but she can influence the minds of your operators. Cause them to make mistakes, doubt their instruments, freeze in crucial moments. Defense Minister Chen spoke up from across the table. Is there any way to counter these psychic attacks? Mental discipline helps, but HFY is extremely powerful. However, Kyra paused, an idea forming. There might be another way. She turned to Marcus. The cultural exchange database you showed me, does it include philosophical texts? Meditation techniques? Mental exercises? Certainly. We have thousands of years of human techniques for mental fortitude and clarity. Then, we might be able to train your key personnel in counter-psychic disciplines. My studies of pre-imperial Zephyrian culture included defensive techniques that were developed specifically to resist psychic domination. General Harrison looked skeptical. You're talking about teaching our people alien meditation techniques in less than 3 days? I'm talking about giving them tools to protect their minds from my sister's attacks. It's not perfect, but it's better than facing her unprepared. The debate continued for hours, but eventually a plan began to take shape. It was desperate and incomplete, but it was something. Earth's fleets would engage the Zephyrian forces in conventional combat while specially trained teams worked to disrupt their psychic warfare capabilities. As the meeting finally ended and officials scattered to implement the defense plans, Marcus and Kyra found themselves alone in the conference room. Are you sure about this? Marcus asked quietly. Once the fighting starts, there's no going back. You'll be considered a traitor by the Empire forever. I was already considered a failure by the Empire, Kyra replied. At least now I'm a failure who chooses her own path. Marcus moved closer to her, his expression serious. Kyra, I need you to know something. Regardless of what happens in the next few days, regardless of whether we survive this or not, meeting you has been the best thing that ever happened to me. Marcus. Let me finish. When I read your work, when I learned about the woman who preserved ancient wisdom despite living in an empire that valued only conquest, I hoped I might someday meet someone like you. I never dared hope I might actually find you. He took her hands in his, and Kyra felt warmth spread through her entire being. I know this started as a political alliance, Marcus continued, but, somewhere between that first day and, now, it became something real. At least for me. For me too, Kyra whispered. Marcus, I've spent my entire life being told I was worthless, being made to feel like my very existence was a mistake. But, when I'm with you, when I see myself through your eyes, you see who you really are. Who you've always been. They stood together in the conference room, holding each other while outside the windows, Earth's defensive fleets began moving into position. In less than 3 days, the Zephyrian Empire would arrive with conquest on their minds. But, Kyra was no longer the unwanted princess her father had sent away as a joke. She was a woman who had found her strength, her purpose, and her love. And she would fight for all three. The next morning brought Velana and HFY to her quarters. They entered without permission, as they always had, but, this time Kyra didn't shrink away from them. Sister, Velana said, her tone deceptively casual, we've come to discuss your future. My future is my own to decide. HFY laughed, objects around the room beginning their familiar orbital dance. How charming. The family failure has found her voice. But, voices can be silenced, dear sister. Not anymore, Kyra said firmly. I'm under the protection of Earth's government now. Any action against me would be considered an act of war. War is coming anyway, Velana replied. The only question is whether you'll be a casualty or a survivor. Father has given you one final chance, HFY added. Renounce this foolish alliance, help us coordinate the invasion, and you'll be forgiven. Continue this rebellion, and you'll be destroyed along with your precious humans. Kyra looked at her sisters, these women who had tormented her throughout her childhood, who had made her feel small and worthless and unwanted. They were still beautiful, still powerful, still everything the Empire valued. And she no longer cared. "Tell father," she said clearly, "that his unwanted daughter has found something worth fighting for. Tell him that the Empire's greatest failure chooses love over fear, peace over conquest, hope over despair. Tell him yourself," Velena said coldly, "when you're kneeling before his throne in chains." As her sisters left, Kyera felt a strange sense of peace settle over her. The die was cast. The choice was made. Whatever came next, she would face it as herself, not as the Emperor's disappointment, but as Kyera, keeper of wisdom, seeker of truth, and a woman who had finally learned to love and be loved. The war was coming. But, for the first time in her life, she was ready to fight. The Zephyrian fleet emerged from hyperspace like a plague of metal locusts against the star field. Kyera stood in Earth's orbital command center, watching the tactical display as hundreds of Imperial warships took position at the edge of the solar system. Each vessel was a masterpiece of destructive capability, built for one purpose: the complete subjugation of entire worlds. "Fleet deployment complete," reported Lieutenant Commander Santos. "Sensors indicate 847 vessels of various classes. They're maintaining position at the heliopause." General Harrison studied the display with grim satisfaction. "They're being cautious. Good. That gives us time." "Time for what?" asked Defense Minister Chen. "Our entire combined fleet is barely 200 ships." "Time," said Marcus from his position beside Kyera, "for our secret weapon to work." All eyes turned to Kyera. Over the past 2 days, she had worked tirelessly with Earth's military psychologists and meditation experts, developing a crash course in mental defense techniques. The program combined ancient Zephyrian meditation practices with human psychological training methods, creating something entirely new, a defense against psychic warfare that neither species had developed alone. "The training teams are in position," she reported. "Every key command officer, communication specialist, and ship captain has received at least basic instruction in mental shielding techniques. It won't stop HFY completely, but it should reduce her effectiveness significantly." "Should," General Harrison repeated grimly. "In war," Kyera said quietly, "should is often the best we can hope for." The communication board lit up with an incoming transmission. "Imperial flagship requesting communication with Earth Command," the operator announced. "Put it through," Harrison ordered. The main display shimmered and resolved into the familiar figure of Emperor Vexthul. He sat upon his portable throne, flanked by Velena in full battle armor and HFY whose eyes glowed with barely contained psychic energy. "People of Earth," the Emperor's voice boomed through the command center, "I am Vexthul, ruler of the Zephyrian Empire. You will surrender immediately and unconditionally, or face complete annihilation." General Harrison stepped forward. "This is General Patricia Harrison, Commander of Earth's Defense Forces. We reject your demand. Earth will defend itself." Vexthul's laugh was like breaking crystal. "With what? Your tiny fleet. Your primitive weapons. I have conquered 1,000 worlds, human. Your resistance will be brief and meaningless." "Perhaps," Harrison replied calmly, "but it will be resistance nonetheless." The Emperor's expression darkened. "Then, you will die. But, first, I will give you a demonstration of Imperial power." His eyes fixed on something off-screen. "Bring me the traitor." Kyera's heart stopped as 2 Imperial guards dragged a familiar figure into view. Ambassador Theclon looked battered and defeated, his diplomatic robes torn and stained. "Ambassador!" Kyera gasped. "Princess," Theclon managed to say before one of the guards struck him silent. "Your pet diplomat," Vexthul announced, "has been found guilty of facilitating treason against the Empire. The penalty is death." He gestured negligently, and Velena drew her plasma sword. "Wait. Kyra stepped forward, her voice carrying across the communication link. Father, the ambassador was only following his orders. He had no part in my decisions. Ah, my unwanted daughter speaks at last. Tell me, Kyra, does the sight of your friend's impending execution change your mind about your foolish rebellion? Kyra felt tears burning her eyes, but her voice remained steady. It reminds me why I chose to stand with people who value life over power. How disappointing. Velana, proceed. No. Kyra lunged toward the screen as if she could somehow reach through it to save the ambassador. Marcus caught her, holding her as Velana's blade descended. The screen went black. For a long moment, the command center was silent except for Kyra's ragged breathing. Then, General Harrison's voice cut through the grief. All ships, battle stations. This is not a drill. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Earth's defense fleets moved into position while the Zephyrian forces began their advance. The first skirmishes took place among the outer planets, probing attacks designed to test human defenses and resolve. Kyra found herself in the unique position of serving as both strategic advisor and translator. Her knowledge of Imperial tactics proved invaluable, while her growing understanding of human psychology allowed her to bridge gaps between the two approaches to warfare. Incoming psychic attack, shouted the communications officer. Multiple stations reporting disorientation and panic. Deploy the mental discipline protocols, Kyra called out. All personnel, begin the focusing exercises immediately. Around the command center, officers closed their eyes and began the breathing techniques she had taught them. The ancient Zephyrian meditation combined with human mindfulness practices created a buffer against HFY's psychic assault. Communication stabilizing, the officer reported with surprise. Whatever you did, it's working. The relief was short-lived. On the tactical display, a massive concentration of Zephyrian ships was moving toward Earth's primary defensive line. That's Velana's personal squadron, Kyra identified. She's leading the assault herself. Can we match their firepower? Asked General Harrison. Marcus shook his head. Not directly. But, we don't have to match them. We just have to survive long enough. Long enough for what? For Plan B, Marcus said grimly. Plan B was desperate, dangerous, and completely unprecedented. Instead of trying to defeat the Zephyrian fleet in conventional combat, Earth's forces would attempt something that had never been tried before, a coordinated psychological warfare campaign designed not to destroy the enemy ships, but to demoralize their crews. Broadcasting on all Imperial frequencies, reported the communications officer. What followed was unlike any weapon ever deployed in galactic warfare. Instead of plasma cannons or antimatter torpedoes, Earth launched stories. Transmissions began flooding Imperial communication channels, not propaganda or threats, but genuine accounts of human culture, philosophy, and values. Kyra's own research formed the backbone of the assault. Her studies of pre-Imperial Zephyrian culture were broadcast alongside human poetry, art, and music. The contrast was stark and deliberate. Here was what the Zephyrian people had been, and here was what they could become again. What is this? Velana's voice crackled over the communicator. Some kind of new weapon. It's called hope, Marcus replied over the open channel. Something your people haven't experienced in generations. The effect was gradual but noticeable. Across the Imperial fleet, crew members began hesitating. Some ships began to lag behind their formations. Reports filtered in of minor mutinies and acts of sabotage aboard Zephyrian vessels. Impossible, HFY's voice joined the communication. No species has ever resisted Imperial conquest through stories. No species has ever tried, Kyra said, stepping forward to the communication console. Sister, you know our history. Before the Empire, our people were scholars and artists, builders and dreamers. This is what we were meant to be. Silence, traitor. You have poisoned your mind with human weakness. I have cleared my mind of imperial lies, Kyera replied. Zwexella, Velana, you don't have to be father's weapons. You can choose to be yourselves. We are ourselves. Velana snarled. We are the Empire's finest warriors. You are our father's prisoners, just as I was. But, you don't have to remain prisoners forever. The psychological assault continued for hours, wearing away at Imperial morale while Earth's forces conducted hit-and-run attacks against the edge of the fleet. It wasn't enough to defeat the Zephyrians, but, it was enough to slow them down, to make them doubt. And, doubt, as Kyera knew, was the enemy of tyranny. Multiple ships breaking formation, reported the tactical officer. Imperial discipline is deteriorating. But, even as some Zephyrian vessels began to withdraw, the core of Velana's assault fleet pressed forward. The Silver Princess had always been the most loyal of Vexthol's daughters, the most committed to Imperial ideology. Incoming transmission from the Imperial flagship, announced communications. Emperor Vexthol's image appeared on the screen, and, his rage was terrible to behold. Enough of this madness. Velana, you will cease this delay and, destroy the human fleet immediately. Use any means necessary. Yes, father, Velana replied. Deploying planet-killer missiles. The blood drained from Kyera's face. Marcus, you need to evacuate Earth immediately. Those weapons can crack a planet's crust. Where would we go? This is our home. Then, we stop them here, General Harrison declared. All ships, intercept those missiles at any cost. What followed was the most desperate battle in human history. Earth's entire fleet threw itself against the incoming planet killers, sacrificing ship after ship to prevent even one of the massive weapons from reaching their world. But, there were too many missiles and, too few defenders. 3 missiles have broken through, reported the tactical officer. Impact in 17 minutes. Kyera closed her eyes, feeling the weight of failure crushing down upon her. She had hoped to save both worlds through understanding and compassion. Instead, she had doomed the planet that had shown her kindness. I'm sorry, she whispered to Marcus. I'm so sorry. But, Marcus was studying the tactical display with the intensity that had made him a brilliant strategist. Kyera, those meditation techniques you taught our people, could they work on a larger scale? What do you mean? Could you use them to reach the crews of those missile ships? Not to attack them, but, to communicate with them directly? Kyera's eyes widened as she understood. It would require an enormous psychic effort. And, I'm not trained in offensive psychic techniques like Zwexella. But, you wouldn't be attacking. You'd be sharing. Could you transmit thoughts and memories directly to their minds? Possibly. But, it would leave me completely vulnerable, and, there's no guarantee it would work. Marcus took her hands in his. The choice is yours. I won't ask you to risk your life for a plan that might not work. Kyera looked around the command center at the humans who had welcomed her, who had treated her with dignity and respect, who had shown her what love could be. Then, she thought of the ambassador, dying for the crime of serving as her escort. Of all the Zephyrian crew members who were following orders without truly understanding what they were doing. I have to try, she said quietly. The psychic link was unlike anything Kyera had ever attempted. Instead of the careful mental discipline she had learned in her studies, she opened her mind completely, reaching out across space toward the crews of the approaching missile ships. What she shared wasn't propaganda or argument, but memory and emotion. She showed them her life in the Empire, the constant fear, the crushing loneliness, the sense of worthlessness that had defined her existence. And, then, she showed them her time on Earth, the kindness of strangers, the joy of being valued for her mind and heart, the wonder of falling in love. The effort was devastating. Kyera felt her consciousness spreading too thin, her life force burning away like a candle in a hurricane. But, she held on, pouring everything she had into the link. And, across the void, something impossible happened. The missile ships began to change course. What's happening? Velana's voice crackled with confusion. Squadron leaders, report. Princess, came a shaky voice over the Imperial communication channel, we can't do this. These humans have families, dreams, children. This is wrong. You will follow your orders. No, said another voice. We won't. Not anymore. One by one, the planet-killer missiles self-destructed as their crews chose compassion over conquest. Across the Imperial fleet, ships began powering down weapons and requesting permission to withdraw. But the effort had cost Kyra everything. She collapsed in Marcus's arms, her breathing shallow and her consciousness fading. Stay with me, Marcus whispered urgently. Don't you dare leave me now. I love you, Kyra managed to whisper before darkness claimed her. When she woke, the first thing she saw was Marcus's face looking down at her with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. How long? She asked weakly. 2 days. The medics weren't sure you'd wake up at all. Kyra struggled to sit up, and Marcus helped her. Through the window of the medical bay, she could see Earth's blue skies unmarred by destruction. The fleet? Gone. Most of them withdrew after the missile crews refused to complete their mission. The few that remained were convinced to leave by more traditional diplomatic methods. My father? Marcus's expression darkened. Recalled the entire fleet in rage. According to our intelligence sources, he's declared you officially dead to the Empire. As far as the Zephyrian government is concerned, Princess Kyra never existed. Despite everything, Kyra felt a strange sense of peace at those words. She had never truly belonged in the Empire anyway. Now, officially, she was free of it forever. And, my sisters. No word on Zyxela. But, Velana. Marcus paused. She sent a private message before the fleet withdrew. He activated a small holographic display, and Velana's image appeared. But, this wasn't the proud warrior Princess Kyra remembered. Her sister looked tired, uncertain. Sister, the recording began, I don't understand what happened out there. What you did, what you showed us. I've been having dreams. Memories of things that happened before the Empire, stories Mother used to tell us before she died. I don't know what to do with these feelings, but, perhaps you were right. Perhaps there are different ways to be strong. The message ended, leaving Kyra with tears in her eyes. She's questioning everything she's ever believed, Marcus observed. Your psychic link didn't just affect the missile crews. It reached her too. Change begins with a single doubt, Kyra said quietly. And, doubt spreads like fire. Over the following days, as Kyra recovered and the immediate crisis passed, reports began filtering in from across the galaxy. The story of the battle for Earth was spreading, carried by Zephyrian crew members who had experienced Kyra's psychic link. On world after world, beings who had accepted imperial rule without question were beginning to ask why they had never been given a choice. The revolution was subtle but unstoppable. Not a war of weapons, but a war of ideas. Not conquest, but awakening. And, at the center of it all was the Emperor's unwanted daughter, who had discovered that love was indeed stronger than fear, that hope could overcome despair, and that sometimes the greatest act of rebellion was simply choosing to be yourself. The wedding ceremony took place a month later in the same gardens where Kyra had first seen human children playing with innocent joy. Representatives from a dozen worlds attended, including several species that had recently declared independence from the Zephyrian Empire. As Kyra stood beside Marcus, speaking vows of love and partnership, she thought about how far she had traveled from the frightened princess who had arrived on Earth as her father's joke. She had found her strength not in conquest, but in compassion. She had discovered her value not in dominance, but in understanding. She had learned that love was not weakness, but the greatest power in the universe. And, somewhere in the galaxy, in the shadows of a crumbling empire, her message of hope continued to spread. 3 years after the battle for Earth, Kara stood in the observation deck of the newly christened starship Aurora, watching as construction crews put the finishing touches on humanity's first deep space diplomatic vessel. The ship was a marvel of collaborative engineering, combining human innovation with technological gifts from the growing alliance of worlds that had found the courage to break free from imperial rule. "The final systems check is complete," Marcus reported as he joined her at the viewing port. "We launch tomorrow." Kara smiled, still amazed at how natural happiness had become to her. "And, our destination?" "The Altair system. The local government there has formally requested mediation in their independence negotiations with the Empire. It had become a pattern over the past 3 years. World after world, system after system, beings across the galaxy were demanding freedom from imperial rule. Most sought independence through negotiation rather than warfare, and, increasingly they asked for Earth's help in the process. The humans had become known as the species that had defeated the Empire not through superior firepower, but through the radical concept of treating enemies as potential friends. "Any word from our advance team?" Kara asked. Marcus nodded toward the communication center. "Lieutenant Commander Santos is handling the briefing now. Want to listen in?" They made their way to the briefing room where Santos was addressing the diplomatic team that would be accompanying them to Altair. "The Altairans are a peaceful species," Santos was explaining. "Primarily agricultural, with a strong tradition of communal decision-making. They were incorporated into the Empire about 50 years ago and have been providing food for Imperial mining operations in the sector." "And the Imperial response to their independence request?" asked Dr. Miranda Vasquez, the mission's chief negotiator. "Mixed. The local imperial governor is reportedly willing to negotiate, but there are hardline factions that want to make an example of them. The situation is complicated by the fact that the Altairans are being led by someone familiar to us." Santos activated the holographic display, and Kara gasped. Standing before the Altair Council in the image was a tall figure in silver armor, but the armor was different now, cleaner lines, less aggressive styling, with symbols of peace rather than conquest. "Princess Velena," Marcus breathed. "She arrived at Altair 6 months ago," Santos continued, claiming refugee status and requesting permission to help mediate between the local population and imperial forces. "According to our intelligence sources, she's been instrumental in keeping the independence movement peaceful." Kara felt her hearts racing. Her sister, the perfect imperial warrior, the daughter their father had been most proud of, was now actively working against the Empire. "There's more," Santos said. "Princess Velena has specifically requested that Princess Kara be part of any diplomatic mission to Altair. She says she has information that could be crucial to the negotiations." After the briefing, Kara and Marcus walked through the corridors of the Aurora, past laboratories where human and alien scientists worked together to develop new technologies, past meeting rooms where diplomats from a dozen species planned peaceful resolutions to ancient conflicts. "Are you nervous about seeing her again?" Marcus asked. "Terrified," Kara admitted. "The last time we spoke, she was trying to convince me to betray Earth. Now she's apparently leading her own rebellion against Father. I don't know what to expect." Marcus took her hand. "Whatever she's become, whatever she wants, we'll face it together." The journey to Altair took 2 weeks, during which Kara found herself constantly wondering what had changed her sister so dramatically. The last message from Velena before the Imperial fleet's withdrawal had hinted at doubt, at questions that had never been asked before. But this level of transformation seemed almost impossible. When the Aurora dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Altair system, they were met by a sight that took everyone's breath away. The space around the primary inhabited world was filled with ships, not just Altair vessels, but craft from dozens of species, all flying flags of independence from imperial rule. "It's a refugee fleet," Dr. Vasquez observed. "Beings from all over the galaxy who've left imperial space seeking freedom. And they're all looking to Altair for leadership," added Santos. Princess Velana has apparently become something of a symbol for the independence movement. As the Aurora approached the planet, Kyra studied the tactical displays with growing amazement. The defensive positions around Altair weren't designed for conquest or domination, but for protection. It was a purely defensive arrangement, clearly intended to shield the planet from attack while offering no threat to anyone who came in peace. Incoming transmission from the surface, reported the communications officer. The main display activated, and there she was, Velana, but transformed. Her armor was still silver, but it was decorated now with symbols Kyra recognized from their childhood, ancient Zephyrian ideographs that represented concepts like harmony and growth. Her expression was still strong, still commanding, but there was something different in her eyes. "Sister," Velana said, and her voice carried none of the old arrogance or contempt. "Welcome to Altair." "Velana," Kyra replied carefully. "I understand you requested my presence here." "I did. There are things we need to discuss, truths that need to be shared. Will you come down to the surface?" "Both of us," Marcus said, stepping into view of the camera. "Kyra and I work as a team." Velana's expression flickered with something that might have been approval. "Of course. I would expect nothing less from the man who chose to love our father's greatest disappointment." "I chose to love the most remarkable woman in the galaxy," Marcus corrected. "Our father's opinions were irrelevant then, and remain irrelevant now." For the first time in Kyra's memory, Velana smiled with genuine warmth. "Spoken like a true human. Very well, both of you are welcome. But, come prepared for surprises." The shuttle trip to Altair's surface took them over landscapes that were breathtaking in their beauty. Rolling hills covered in crops that fed not just the local population but refugees from across the galaxy. Cities that blended architectural styles from dozens of species, creating something entirely new and wonderful. And, everywhere they looked, beings who had once been enemies were working together in harmony. "It's incredible," Dr. Vasquez murmured. "How